Hello, welcome to another video. I know it's been a little while, but life's been really busy, so trying to make videos as much as I can here, but it's amazing how much time it takes to edit and upload these things, but nonetheless, I know some of you appreciate it, so I'll keep going as I can, and I've got some things I want to get going over the summer too, but today I just want to make a video, another kind of Vedic review video, talking about some important texts or key books, and this one I'm going to switch it up a little, and this is a somewhat popular video topic, and that's namely the beginning astrology books, or books for people looking into astrology, which is it's a hard question to answer, really, just because astrology can be a very complex subject, and there's so many opinions out there, so it's hard to really recommend one source, one text, but I got a few things for you to consider when looking at this, and some areas to look into further. So the first book I'm going to recommend for beginners is to pick up a copy of Parashara Shastra. Now, this is what most modern astrologers think is the foundation, or one of the bedrocks of Vedic astrology, and at least for me, looked into this text more than a lot of the other classical texts. Well, I have a lot of them. I definitely spend a lot of time with this because it has a lot of information that you won't find elsewhere, but it's also, as you go out there in internet, Jyotish land especially, this is a text people often reference or often claim to be teaching out of, so many things. So I think it's important to have this text as a reference to see what's actually in there and to make a connection. This is an important text to really read for yourself, see where some of these rules are coming from. And for those of you who believe that Jaimini astrology was a separate branch, well, there's a lot of quote-unquote Jaimini stuff in here, so you get a full scope of different techniques and different rules. In fact, you're going to get more Jaimini information in Parashara, on some levels, on the basics at least, then you're going to find in Jaimini, and most people don't get into some of the more details and esoterics of what's actually in Jaimini. So Parashara Shastra is really a key text to get your hands on. I know for me, before I was ever even into astrology, I was up in Portland at Powell's Books, which is what I once thought was an amazing source. I find it limiting myself as the deeper I dig into some of this stuff. But they had a copy of this text, Santanam's version, and I had no interest in studying astrology, and I just felt really a calling to it for some reason by looking through it, and just I don't know, one of those intuitions. And so I bought it and sat on my shelf for many, many years. I didn't even touch it, but now I probably know that text better than most classical texts, funny enough, and I learn every day still. There's a lot packed in there. And so, with that caveat is that translations vary, and you can't take what's given in any one translation verbatim, and without some teacher explicating things or stepping you through it, it can be hard to really dig into some of the classical texts. However, once you do have some connection with someone, and you do have a framework for what's being said in these texts and how they're approaching it, then the lot starts to open up to you. You can start to see some of the logic behind some of the principles, what they're getting at, this and that. So it's an interesting process, but don't think just by getting Parashara and picking it up you're going to be able to really tackle Jyotish. It's more, I use it more as a reference to see, what's in there, what to glean from it, and things of that nature. So that'd be the first one I'd start with. And you can either, Santanam's was kind of the original, or one of the most popular English versions. Sharma has another edition, which I find a little more clearly phrased, and there's a little more information packed in there. So I use that one a bit, but it's kind of up to you what you're drawn to. Now, the second text I would recommend is not so much a text, but as far as materials that I've come across that I've found really, really useful, it was actually a PDF course by Vaughn Manley, I believe is his name. He's one of Can Rao's students. And he wrote a whole series of PDF lessons to be kind of worked on as a course. And so it's not really a formal text. You need to go to his website to download these things. But and it can be pricey. So the whole set of materials is about $200, and which some of it isn't totally necessary. But the thing I really appreciate with what he's done with this material is he's really laid it out in a logical fashion, in a systematic fashion. There's exercises he gives, and just the way he explains things for the beginner is literally the best I've found out of any book. I've never found one book that really lays it out like he does. And I think part of the reason is because he was a trained teacher, okay? And what the problem I find, not just in the Jyotish world, but you name it, yoga, this, that, a lot of people have a lot of knowledge and are very high knowledgeable and great practitioners of some of these subjects, but there's a big difference between knowledge and pedagogy, and being able to convey that, to convey the subjects, and to impart it to a student with that in mind. And so, just because Vaughn Paul is not the greatest astrologer ever or whatever, doesn't he's respected by a lot of people. It doesn't just because he doesn't have that pedigree, he still is, I find, very clear, systematic, and and so if you go on my course site too, some of how I've structured my lessons is somewhat similar. It's not totally similar because I get into a lot of different other information and whatnot, and I've learned a lot outside of what he's taught, so I don't totally agree with everything he teaches either, and I have found a few mistakes in some definitions, such as like declination about the planets, and just different kind of small details, or he's of the Jaimini Prashara, different camps, that kind of logic. So like anything in life, you're going to have some differences, but overall I really found his useful. And if you don't feel like shelling out the full few $100s for a course, I believe there's one lesson that really kind of brings together a lot of the information. I think it was lesson 10 or 11. I'll put a link below to the one I'm talking about. I'll look it up after I make this, but there's one lesson where it really shows how to start putting things together with the chart, and how it all flows together, which I found very useful. And while you won't get the depth if you follow the whole course with just that one lesson, still, if you just want to get a feel for it, there's that lesson. I think he has a free lesson too on his website too, so you can see. But that was a very key resource I found. Now, once you get some basics around how this stuff's working, there is another text which I love, and I found it early on when I started studying, and I feel very lucky for that. And this is James Braha's text. I believe it's called the Art of Hindu Astrology. And once again, I'll link below for these texts. So. You can buy them if you want or not, but if you do click on links, it does help support the channel a little, FYI. So, but this text, amongst most of them that I've read, is really unique, and it's really appreciated because the way the text is set up is it's a dialogue between him and one of his students. And it's also written after he had been practicing astrology for about 20 or so years. And so, he had studied, he wrote some books early on, which I find pretty, I don't know, pretty sparse and pretty basic. I don't find some of his other texts really useful at all. But this text is after he had practiced for quite some time, and so he had found rules and certain things that he found consistently working, and he had his own framework for how he approached a chart. And it's delineated in that text. And you also get this probing student asking him questions about, why are things this way, why are things that way. So, a lot of those basic fundamental things that often come up when people are new to astrology are getting answered in there by an experienced teacher and what they've seen in practice. And that's one of the key things, is that the more you study, the more you're going to find either you gravitate towards certain rules, certain techniques. Everyone's a very different astrologer, and so even the ancients, like Mahira only used I don't think he used Vimshotri. He used like Naisargika Dasha and like Mula Dasha. I believe that's correct. Don't quote me, but he only used basic things that would we think are crazy. But every astrologer has their own approach, and so. That's why I often recommend it's good, and why we've also often in the tradition is get a guru and follow their path, and then once you imbibe that, you can go out on your own. And so this book gives you at least a flavor of that if you don't have it on your own. And and he gives his opinion. This works for me. This is what I've seen working. Da da da. Prove me wrong. He gives tips from some of the pundits that he studied with, and I have found a lot of that stuff is pretty useful, actually. What he gives in that text, and there's tons of information in there. You could spend a year easy just studying that text and really absorbing what it's giving. So like for those of you who don't have a teacher, who know some basics, that text I think is really great to start to grapple with how do I start putting this together? How do I start reasoning it for myself? Because that's really where it starts coming down to, is how do you start imbibing it more for yourself as you move on to trying to read charts and being comfortable with that. It's an uneasy step to start to look at charts and speak to it off of it, and it's not that easy. And I really appreciated that with his text. Moving forward with it, and he basically one of the big things he points out in this book is if you're not comfortable with the gray areas, if you want things that are totally black and white and are one set way, then Jyotish is not for you. You have to be comfortable with some of that messiness and some of the mystical, esoteric kind of side if you want to start progressing or start stepping into Jyotish further. And getting that lesson early on really helped me as I moved on to study other texts and more deeply with other teachers, and being open and appreciative for what I could glean, what I could understand, while still being able to roll with those areas that those principles that weren't working, that I felt uncomfortable with, to be able to just put that in a box and say, okay, I'm gonna keep picking out those things that I find working, and over time you build up a toolkit for how you approach a chart and how you plug into things, and then based on that you'll find certain people will gravitate towards you depending on the knowledge you have and how you approach things, and those are your people, and the rest of them can go somewhere else for whatever they need. If they need a crazy tantric puja, then you go to a certain practitioner. If you need some bad advice because that's your karma, then you go to certain people. I won't name any names, but I've seen some interesting readings from other people that have come to me from certain people with certain pedigree. But nonetheless, so yeah, it's all good, and highly recommended text. If you're going to get one out of some of these things I'm recommending, that might be a good one for you to check out. And they are running out of hard copies, so watch out. And they're I'll also link, there's a free portion to it on his website you can check out to see if it's something that resonates with you. And the last book I'm going to recommend is by one of Sanjay Rath's students. His name is Zoran. I'm not going to butcher his last name because I will, but you just call him Zoran. And this is a text. He actually has two books currently. and he's coming out with another one. The one I recommend for beginners is it's called To Begin With, Vedic Astrology, and it's a really raw beginner's book, and really covering the fundamentals, and from his traditional vantage point, with a lineage guru, and so you get some of that feel for this, which you don't necessarily get with Braha or Vaughn, because and some of these other sources. And in that text, he really drills into like the fundamentals of, the elements of how does, the planets and the elements work together to come up with the karakas and the significations. And so while Vaughn does get into some of that, he doesn't really emphasize, some of those really key foundational points that are given in this text. And it's not the best edited. His English is a little rough, and but he gets into some pretty specific rules as far as distinctions between bhavas and signs and what that means, how to interpret between house rulers and karakas, and some really fundamental distinctions, and how to look at a chart that you won't find in any other book. And that's why he wrote these books, is because a lot of people, when you read all these tons of books, you start getting what's called astrological constipation, because you don't have some core fundamentals in place with understanding what is what in the chart. It's often like, okay, how's a house doing? We want to look at the sign ruler, the planets in the house, and some people might mention the karaka sometimes, but really the karaka is one of the key things as far as if a house is going to flourish. But he gets into what do each of those mean, and I'll let you discover that on your own if you decide to take up those books. They are a little pricey because they're self-published, and he does shipping himself, but I definitely think it's worth the price of entry. Now he has these other books called Brush Up on Vedic Astrology in the volume 1 and 2, and those are kind of review of what you might consider basic concepts, but I guarantee you those are not really beginner books. They're brush ups for really people who have a good foundation and really want to hone in with some solid rules on, how do I find how many children are in the chart? How do I, how do you use the panchang properly? Second volume is going to get into awesome topics like Argala, Ruda, things like that. So those are a little more intermediate, but once again, really great text to study too if you find yourself wanting to move down further. So that's it for this Vedic Review section. I hope that gives you some ideas, those of you looking for more guidance in astrology and how to approach it. I know those choices, I've seen a lot of these videos where people recommend texts, and I think those are fairly unique as far as what other people put out there. I've read a big swath of beginners books alike, and these are really still the ones that stick out to me. If you have any questions about these or other books you may have read or may have looked at, feel free to post a question or comment below, and I can give you, my opinion or, any number of things. So, yeah, nonetheless, thank you for checking this out, and hope you're well. Namaskar.